Hi folks, so I have been doing these sort of backdrop videos, and I did one on Pluto in Capricorn, and I am going to do this one on Saturn in Aquarius. And I did the Pluto in Capricorn one just before the Capricorn full moon, which was our last full moon about a week or so ago. And I lost a handful of subscribers, and I mean a handful, a tiny handful, and it may very well be that they were wondering why I'm doing a video on Pluto and Capricorn, except that as I explained when I did the full moon video, that's what is worth meditating on, because that full moon was conjunct Pluto very nearly. And in addition, some of the transits that are being made to these longer-term transits that are occurring in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, specifically Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces, are really important by virtue of the transits that are occurring with the personal planets, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, to these planetary transits that have been in play for a little while. And I'm finding increasingly that with the lunations coming up, that these planets are involved. The next couple of full moons, the full moon in Aquarius is conjunct Saturn, and the full moon in Pisces will be conjunct Neptune. And I'm not even going to get into right now the other transits that are coming up, some quite important. We are, as of today, entering what is called Leo season, which is really the fact that the sun is going to be transiting the sign of Leo for the next 30-odd days. And Mercury's already in Leo, and at the very least Mercury, and then the sun. And then, indeed, even the new moon that is going to be happening on the 28th. Mercury, the sun, actually more than the new moon, the full moon that's going to occur in the middle of August. I think it's August 11th. Irrespective, we'll cover that at that time. But the Mercury, the Sun, and Venus are going to oppose Saturn very shortly. So we're going to have a full Saturn very, very shortly in about 3 weeks' time, 2.5 weeks' time. So I'm going to cover the Saturn. The other thing about these videos that I'm doing is, as we move along and planets continue to make important transits to these planets, I can always refer back to these kind of backdrop videos so that I don't have to repeat myself constantly. With Saturn, and you've heard me say this so many times in the sign of Aquarius, wherever Saturn goes, and someone who watches this channel regularly had made the point that Saturn is not all about boundaries, but in my experience it kind of is, because even if Saturn is building a foundation or providing you with responsibility or growth or a long-term foundation or a long-term gift in some way, it ultimately is totally dependent on your ability to manifest what Saturn is trying to build. And that requires your own sense of boundaries with yourself. Saturn ultimately, no question, is a planet of discipline. And discipline is, after all, the highest form of self-love. And Saturn, I find, is very much about self-love. It is very much about us. If you look at this idea of that's so current right now with something like the law of attraction, which is to not be attached to the outcome, and frankly, that teaching is at the heart of the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, which is you go in, you do the best you can, and you do not get attached to the outcome. Saturn ultimately is truly about us taking ourselves seriously enough so that any habits or patterns or behaviors, and I'm coming to language that I use all the time with Saturn, that do not serve us and that are in place for a while, are eliminated so that we can work towards manifesting what is for our highest benefit and potential. And if we are not operating that way, then Saturn has a tendency to test us. Wherever Saturn is, it certainly has a nose to the grindstone quality. It can create tension, anxiety, work, responsibility, a feeling of being tested, a feeling like really making sure you dot the I's, cross the T's, it all rests on you, burdensome energy. Ultimately, as I say, lots of times Saturn is like that strict teacher that likes to make you Well, this is not the best analogy, but it is this kind of wake up at 5 o'clock, 5 laps across the field. What are you eating? What are you? A lot of us know that this kind of adoption of Saturnian energy, especially as an adult, is challenging because in order to really enact behaviors that are for our highest good and in order to behave in a disciplined manner, there's a lot of inner work that has to get done. Now, I am not a psychologist. I am not a medical professional. I'm also very wary of being a spiritual anything. These days, everyone is a spiritual teacher. Everyone is doing TED Talks. Everyone is writing columns. And quite frankly, it's sort of become the fashion to be a coach. It's kind of goofy in that regard, almost, when I find that most of the teachings are already encoded and already available to us. Now, it doesn't mean that others cannot be there to remind us, but there is a current propensity towards spiritual work, especially surrounding a kind of greed around our desires. I don't see anyone reading about the law of attraction to eliminate poverty or to ensure that there is a global supply of food or drinking water or sewage, or facilities. Or I see a lot of how can I have the car that I want and the job that I want and the dream that I want, and for all the spiritual work from me. And this is a long-winded way of saying I don't really know that I'm the right person to talk about what it is that blocks us from acting consistently in our highest good. Somewhere there's certainly a relationship with our inner saboteur. I think that's fair to say, because if we are not able to act in ways that are self-loving in a disciplined manner, in a way that allows us to meet our goals, manifest our goals. Saturn is such a strangely spiritual, anti-spiritual planet because it is not, unlike Jupiter, it is not trying to cut a path for you. It is not trying to give you a lucky break. It is placing hurdles in front of you. It is resistance training. It is strength training. It's getting you to jump. It's getting you to master skills. It's getting you to perform. It is getting you to exert in the right way. People who are classical musicians especially are told constantly that 5 minutes of the right type of practice is better than 3 hours of the wrong type of practice. So it's not about, if you're a singer, hurting your vocal cords, practicing things for 3 hours a day. It's about practicing in a way that actually supports and nourishes and sustains. And, meditating on those things that throw us off course, those things that can enable us to better ourselves, whether it is a certain amount of inner child work. I always like to say, and this is from Shakti Gawain, I think, she has this kind of daily calendar. It's a really wonderful, wonderful book. Let me see if I can, give me 1 second. It's coming up, so I'm going to mention it. It's this Awakening, I'm sure this is going to be backward when you see it, Awakening, a Daily Guide to Conscious Living by Shakti Gawain. It's a fantastic, again, only spend money on things or do things. Do not be influenced. It's a recommendation. I'm not going to get a cut from this. I'm not making money off of it. Only get things if you are able to get it, and if you are going to take responsibility for doing something. But I remember at some point there's a question asked, or something to the extent of I'd set an alarm, and of course the alarm went off and stopped the video. Something to the extent of, feeding or treating your inner child every day so it does not sabotage you. So if you're craving that, whatever that thing is, now please, with cravings, again, please make wise choices and choices that are healthy. I'm not saying you should eat a slice of chocolate cake if you're diabetic or do something that's going to be harmful for you. But there's something, I find that there's certainly something within healthy limits, something to that idea of if you need to listen to that song, or if you need to nap for 15-20 minutes, or if you need to read that chapter, whatever you need to do to get that part of you settled so that you can be productive, those kind of inner saboteur works. The other thing is I don't, different people operate in different ways. If you are someone who can kind of be really kind of strict and Saturnian with yourself and, be kind of militaristic and you respond to that, great. If you can't, try to see if you can gently coax yourself into a place of greater productivity. It's funny, all these book recommendations are coming up. There's another book I read recently called The One Thing. There are different types of self-help books. This one, for some reason, I actually found genuinely useful, like applicable, like actually life-changing. Because sometimes you read stuff and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that could be applied. Oh, when am I going to do this? Blah, blah, blah. Again, please purchase things only if you have the funds and you can spare it and it's your choice. I'm not getting a cut from this kind of stuff. But, the One Thing sort of addresses prioritization and tries to address issues related to procrastination and productivity. Irrespective, however you respond to, at the end of the day with the Saturn transit, I will always say whatever lessons Saturn is trying to teach you, if you learn them, in my experience, as Saturn gets ready to leave, and Saturn will leave the sign of Aquarius in March 2023, Saturn tends to give you a gift, or it tends to help you build a strong foundation in this part of the chart. And Saturn, after the sign of Aquarius, is going to go into Pisces. And I find this especially important, and this is why I'm doing these backdrop videos. With Neptune and Pisces, we've had potential issues for some people related to things like theft and gaslighting and loss in the Pisces part of our chart, where the house where Pisces sits. And with Saturn coming in there, it's very likely that 23, 24, 25 are going to be years of reckoning around these kinds of issues. And some people may find that Aquarius and Pisces sit in consecutive houses that have a very clear relationship with each other. So if you're Aquarius rising, then Saturn is transiting your first house, moving into your second house, your own boundaries, your sense of self-worth. If you are a Leo rising, your relationship with others boundaries towards you, shared resources, where are the lines there, what are the lessons you need to learn with regard to your relationship with others. When planets transit the first and second houses, very often I find that we need to embody those energies. When planets transit houses that are associated with other people, it could very much be that they are embodying those energies towards us. So if you are a Leo rising, you could be experiencing partner, spouse, legal affairs where others are acting in Saturnian ways towards you, and so you have to deal with that. If you are an Aquarius rising, then you may find, or a Capricorn rising, you may find that you're the one who is having to act in Saturnian ways against others. It's sort of tied together and amounts to similar principles, but the differences are also worth considering and pondering and significant. Similarly, when it comes to fourth and fifth houses, the relationship between home and children, or home and romance if you are married and the romance is not with your marriage partner. If it's in the sixth or seventh houses, between your work and contracts, contractual obligations. So depending on where Aquarius and Pisces sit, it may be worth it for you to kind of see the connection between these two parts of the chart. And if there is a connection, there isn't always. It's hard to, if you have an Aries rising chart, it might be hard to really kind of determine what could be the connection between the 11th and the 12th house for you, the Aquarius and the Pisces parts of the chart. So irrespective, I'm just, kind of mentioning as much as I can here. Now, Saturn came into Aquarius briefly between March 21st, 2020 and July the 1st, 2020. So March to July 2020, and then December 16th, 2020 to March 7th, 2023. And for me, the Saturn in Aquarius, especially that first transit, was very clearly marked by the Black Lives Matter movement. And Saturn in Aquarius, the one thing I will say is, it's especially important to consider Saturn in Aquarius because especially in 2021, the big transit was Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus. And on the one hand, there's no question that you could look at a Saturn-Uranus square as a square or tension between convention and unconvention, convention and originality, convention and individuality, Saturn being the conventional planet and Uranus being the unconventional, individual, liberated, authentic planet. But Saturn in Aquarius, remember, Aquarius is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus. And Saturn in Aquarius is an extremely questioning placement. Now, I am talking about this energy now more generally. Okay. And when I look at certain things that have come up during this time, which is things like the Black Lives Matter movement, or also, interestingly, this debate about vaccinations and pharmaceutical companies, and please don't project things onto me when I say this, but there's something about Saturn in Aquarius is a very questing, butter will not melt, nothing is taken on faith. If questions need to be asked, questions will be asked, and until I can be convinced and I have tested this and checked this, and until I have all the answers, I will not give this a pass kind of energy. Aquarius is a highly rational, almost, if you have kind of strong Jupiter placements, you know, Sagittarius or Pisces placements or Jupiter paired placements, an extremely annoying energy, because it's one of those, you know, when you can, if you're hanging out with someone who likes to play devil's advocate, who will always, if you're talking about something and you're taking something on faith or something is on optimism, will always be there to question you, or, well, why do you say that? And, well, that doesn't make sense. And, well, I think, you know, that kind of will not let something go, will not demonstrate sometimes the social skills to read the other person, to let an argument drop, but really needs to push for a rational, testing conclusion of something. Sometimes you get this energy stereotypically with people who are into Aquarian professions, medicine, scientific professions, technical professions, you know, coders, computers, very kind of diligent, and in that regard, it can be very testing too of softer principles. So if it's a kind of a classic clash between a tech executive and human resources, well, why should we do this? And will that really lead to this? And, you know, I don't think this, you know, it has that very kind of testing quality. The later the sign in the year, the more distilled the energy of the of the compound, for lack of a better word, that it is associated with. So Aquarius is an air sign, and so the mental quality in Aquarius is extremely concentrated and distilled, just as the earth quality is very concentrated and distilled in Capricorn. The water quality is extremely concentrated and distilled in Pisces, of the fire in Sagittarius, with ideas of faith and optimism. So when it comes to social issues, whichever side in the political platform you sit on, it's not surprising to find this kind of butter will not melt until I have the answers and I can be totally convinced energy. So whether you are whatever you are debating, there's a kind of a dog with a bone kind of concept to it. Now, I'm going to leave that there. And there is some sort of connection overall that people are pointing out to, and I think it's fair with Uranus and Taurus about the state of our planet, with Taurus being sort of a planetary sign, and these important questions that are being asked and need to be asked currently with an Aquarian bent. About sustainability, about global warming, about what it is going to take to convince people that there is an issue or is not an issue, so that decisions can be made accordingly. In your chart, I would highly encourage you to pay attention to, because we are coming to the end of the Saturn transit in Aquarius now. Okay, and so because it's coming to March the 7th, and Saturn is retrograde right now, but then it's going to go direct. When is Saturn going to go direct? I think significantly later this year. Give me 1 second and let me see if I can. October the 23rd. And I think it pretty much, I don't think it's going retrograde again. I think it goes direct October. I could be wrong about this, but I think it goes direct October 23rd, and then I think it's out of Aquarius. And Yeah, it's not coming back into Pisces. That surprises me. I wonder if it's going to go retrograde one more time. Irrespective. Where does Aquarius sit in your chart, my darlings? What house does it occupy? Who sits in that house? What does that house stand for? And how do you need to act in ways that are more measured, more composed, more disciplined, where your boundaries towards yourself are more effective? Even if you want to think that Saturn is about responsibility or achievement or positive things, I have never seen those positive things manifest with Saturn there without discipline and maturity, a Saturnian word. You know, the mantra of respond, don't react. And if you are reacting in the part of the chart where Saturn is transiting and not responding, not trying to manifest your highest possible self as you navigate whatever is coming up and execute in that part of the chart, Saturn is going to continue. You are going to feel like you are just being batted around. Saturn is just going to be like slapping your wrist, lesson after lesson after, repeated issues until you take responsibility for yourself. And another Saturnian concept, understand that your actions have consequences. So the way you respond to something is going to determine the consequence. So how is it that you are going to rule this part of the chart and manifest something strong and lasting? And I think it's important to do so that by the time Saturn comes into Pisces, you are reaping the rewards of these lessons and these behaviors and putting things in place. And it doesn't matter where Saturn sits. Boundaries towards yourself is just the other side of the coin of boundaries towards other people. So whether Saturn is in your first or second house and you feel that you need to implement boundaries against other people, or whether Saturn is transiting your seventh or eighth house, for example, and you feel like other people are acting as though they have to implement boundaries against you and you have to deal with the consequences of that, ultimately, you're dealing with the same issue. You're dealing with your relationships with others. And the same principles apply. Maturity, the ability to keep your energy close to yourself and act. And Saturn has a kind of lonely, singular quality. And again, it is this spiritual, anti-spiritual thing. Ultimately, when you have to act with Saturn's energies, you have to harness a very spiritual part of yourself and keep your own counsel and put the right kind of energy into your action. Ultimately, whether Saturn likes it or not, it is here to impart extremely spiritual lessons around how do you take an action that leads to a successful and happy outcome. And you have to contend with the behaviors and patterns that you have in place, likely for about 28 years, that are no longer working. And Saturn is here to root them out. And there's no question. Part of the reason why I'm doing this video is because I really need to address, as we look at the next week, we really need to pay attention to what is coming up with this Mars-Uranus North Node conjunction at the end of July. We're going to have a Leo new moon on the 28th, and then this conjunction at the end of July. And both the Leo new moon, and even more importantly, this conjunction squares Saturn. This conjunction squares Saturn. At the time of the Leo new moon, at the time of this conjunction, we have Mercury opposing Saturn, and this conjunction squaring Saturn. And so I will expand on these themes more. And then when we have the full moon, 2.5 weeks from now, it's going to be conjunct Saturn. So hence these videos I'm doing as the backdrop, so that you can really, rather than me take up all this time saying this in the actual new moon or the full moon video, I can encourage these energies and just kind of have these videos in place so that when we do the lunation videos, you have something to look at and contemplate. But just as with Pluto and Capricorn, I've asked you to contemplate what Pluto has been trying to transform and what you are resisting or not resisting and what actions need to be taken to make that transformation successful. You can look at the Pluto Capricorn video I did. with this video, I would ask you to really take stock of what it is that you need to do in a Saturnian way in the Aquarius part of your chart, because things are riding on it in a big way, especially in the month of August, and especially now, over the next week even. So, all right, this video is in place, and more videos to follow. Thanks as always. If you found this video interesting and useful, feel free to share it, like the video, comment on the video. Likes and comments, I think, on videos on YouTube drive traffic to it. Click the subscribe button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are interested, and click the bell icon next to the subscribe button and the wiggly bell symbol on top of that bell icon to be notified whenever I do new videos. Okay? Over and out. Thank you.